Hello, hello. It's time to have a little chat about manga. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about manga on my YouTube channel. What a shocking departure. Well, you might not imagine it, but despite the amount of time I spend talking about manga here, it is barely scratching the surface of the amount that I read and the takes that I have. This is definitely one of the most manga saturated periods of my entire life. I don't know why. It just became this kind of compounding thing where I started kind of undertaking certain projects, like the reading all of Weekly Shonen Jump thing, and that just sort of kickstarted all sorts of compounding, self perpetuating desires to just read more and more and more and more. I think my lifestyle is also just very well set up for reading a lot of manga these days. I just have a lot of activities that coincide nicely with reading manga on my phone or reading it on the second screen of my monitor. And I wanted to make more videos about them. At first, I kind of had an ambition of, oh, when I complete a series I really like, especially if it's kind of like a long, famous series, I'd like to do, a real good video deconstruction of it. And I was imagining making all sorts of elaborate slides and perhaps even editing the videos, if you can believe it. But I didn't really have the time to do that. And I just ended up wanting to read more and more manga, and all of these kind of individual highlights fell by the wayside. And so I kind of finally decided to go in the exact opposite direction and make a very unstructured, off the dome, rambling, flub filled video where I just kind of talk loosely and at whatever length I feel is appropriate about all of the series that I have been focused on lately. So this is a combination of stuff that I am reading weekly that I think is just sort of weekly or bi-weekly or whatever, hitting some sort of notable part or climax or just is really impressing me and I want to talk about it. Old series that I am reading for the first time or maybe rereading, and stuff that might not be up to date with current chapters in Japan, but is just getting scanlated now. So, I'm just getting access to it with whatever frequency. This inaugural video will have examples of all of those. I think you get the idea. We're just going to talk. We're just going to yap about manga. So that's what I love to do. Start with Eyeshield 21. I just finished reading this not too long ago. It's a series that I had always been interested in reading. I read chunks of it when I was a kid. I don't know if you guys remember a site called One Manga. I'm really dating myself here. This was a very early scanlation compilation site where I read One Piece way back in the day, as well as a lot of other kind of random shonen series, including Eyeshield. So I didn't even read it from the start back then, I don't think. I think I kind of just randomly read chapters whenever I felt like it, because I was like 12 and I didn't really understand, I think, the value of reading the whole story. And then when One Manga died, when it was taken down, I didn't really replace it with anything right away, and a whole lot of series just kind of got left in the lurch. So this is the first time I actually went through and read the whole thing from start to finish, and I loved it. I loved it. It might be my favorite sports shonen series ever, which is saying a lot. That's a genre I really enjoy. It just has such a liveliness, such an energy. The character designs are so extreme and over the top. There's such a great blend of humor and action and camaraderie and spirit, just that perfect emotional balance that I like from a series like this, where you're never swinging too hard in one direction. There's always a bit of comedic relief, always a bit of inspiration among the dark times, and hints of terror and downfall within the good times, just creating this perfect, compelling tension. I feel like this is a series that owes a lot to kind of the era of shonen, ushered in by series like the original Dragon Ball and One Piece, where this sort of gag foundation overlaid with the action becomes just as fundamental as any aspect of lore or world building. Just this intoxicating, persistent tone of comedy and enjoyment and just sort of lively, over the top, almost experimentalness. One thing I really, really appreciated about this series that I think I haven't really seen done as well in any other sports shonen is how our protagonists are kind of the bad guys. That Himura, who's definitely my favorite character in the series and just one of my favorite characters in any sports shonen, is a devious, conniving trickster god of a man who is always manipulating people and threatening people and coming up with every dirty, underhanded scheme he can to win a match. The protagonists don't win against more unscrupulous enemies by sticking to the ideals of the sport. Rather, the ideals of the sport are you do whatever you can to win. And they stick to those ideas with this evil relish that I just found so intoxicating and addicting. So many chapters are just the opponent can't believe that the Devil Bats would stoop this low, and then they do, and it works, and it feels great. I think it's just such a unique dynamic, and it's sort of like those are always the most interesting characters in these sports series, I think. The bastards. And this is a series where you get to cheer for the bastards. And cheer for them I did. I found myself so endeared to these characters and so endeared to the enemy teams too. It's a series where you feel so compelled by the main games, but even when they show matches between two side teams, I found myself so emotionally invested, rooting so strongly for one side in those moments where it is ambiguous and you're not really sure, since neither team is like the protagonist or the prescribed antagonist, who's gonna move on. Really, just really, really wonderful stuff. The art style, of course, is phenomenal, and early work by Murata, now legend in the scene, doing the One Punch Man remake. The only thing that disappointed me, and you can skip ahead if this is too much of a spoiler, but the ending felt very, very rushed to me. I really felt pretty disappointed by how quickly they moved through the final arcs, and the final game especially just kind of felt like a highlight reel. Everything concluding within like 4 chapters, when normally a game of that magnitude, having been built up so much with so much on the line, would have been depicted over like 20 chapters. It just suddenly shifted into this really uncomfortable gear and rushed through something that it seemed like there was a lot of passion being put into, so many great character designs, so many dynamics being set up, so many arcs that they were kind of making you anticipate being paid off. And then I don't know if it was Jump editorial screwing with them, or that the series was flagging in popularity. I don't really know why, but it certainly seemed like they were given some sort of order or decided upon themselves, okay, we got to wrap this thing up. And they did. It's not like the ending was bad by any stretch. There's aspects of it I really, really like. I think it had a great mix of sentimentality and just excitement about what will happen in these characters' lives going forward. But it just, yeah, it just felt like it should have been given the spectacle and the space to breathe that all of the other arcs were. So that was a little disappointing. But yeah, really, really, really good stuff. I don't know if I have much more to say about it. Made me much more interested in football. American football is a sport that I always kind of appreciated on some level. Like, I think the strategy and the tactics are always pretty cool, but never was a big fan of watching myself. I think just because I knew there was such a learning curve before I could really appreciate a lot of the stuff that was going on. And now I feel more compelled, more curious. So, go Birds! I might be following the NFL next year. Who knows? Yamima no Mamiya is the current super in-depth Fukumoto Mahjong series. I think in Japan it's up to the 9th or 10th volume, but scanlations are lagging a little bit behind. For a long time they were completely stalled. It seemed like whoever was working on it had dropped this series. But in the last week or so, maybe 2 weeks, it got picked up again. And now we're getting a pretty steady stream of chapters, which makes me pretty excited. This is Fukumoto at his Fukumoto-ist, just depicting a game of Mahjong at a glacial pace. Some chapters covering only one discard or maybe one round of discards if he's feeling feisty. Just going hand by hand, each hand almost an arc unto itself. Delving deep into every possible psychological and tactical level that every discard could be interpreted on. It's the sort of stuff that made Akagi such a legendary series that ran for 30 years. And this actually takes place in the same universe as Akagi, decades later with this now, I guess she's like a millennial, but this young woman who is inheriting the mantle of Japan's greatest gambler, one game at a time. Literally one game at a time. We're still in the first game. But demonstrating the same kind of almost supernatural intuition and deep, deep layers of cunning that made Akagi such a cool character and made that series so legendary. She is totally different, though, in terms of personality. She's bubbly and excitable and gets super pissed off, super emotional about everything that's happening. She, too, talks about the flows of Mahjong and what sort of behavior is rewarded by the gods of Mahjong. Again, this sort of pseudo-supernatural talk. But she comes at it from such like a petty, mean-spirited, bemoaning unfairness and stuff. It's really, really funny. And then, of course, all these series are constantly kind of setting up metaphors, which are presented visually, referring to players' luck or the risks that they're taking, or even individual tiles or yaku manifesting in their hands. And it's just so fun to kind of see the same situations emerge that were in Akagi, but with such a totally different like visual language and metaphorical language, where Akagi often pictured himself in a battlefield being held down by suppressive enemy fire, whereas Mamiya is being visited by saints who tut-tut at her, or the phoenixes of her luck rising and falling and taunting her. It's been a lot of fun. It's been quite a while, not since Akagi ended, that I've read a Mahjong series this deep. It certainly made me want to play again, want to kind of appreciate the level of the game on that level again, since I haven't played in a long, long time either. But yeah, I'm very curious if this is going to have ultimately the same scope and the same longevity as Akagi. Again, I think they're probably still playing the same game, even in the current chapters in Japan. That's just how it goes. I will say, though, the one thing that I am curious to see how it develops is, in Akagi, it was the very famous Washizu Mahjong, where 3 of every 4 tiles, like 3/4 of all the tiles, and then, 3 of each 3 of the 4 of each type of tile. Why did I find that so hard to explain? Was transparent, and you could see through it and see what it was in the other person's hand. And that was kind of the major gimmick that made it different from Mahjong and dictated a whole lot of the strategy and the writing and stuff of Akagi. Whereas here, the gimmick is that you can make face-down discards, and then there's this back-and-forth betting game where you can keep throwing in 1,000-point sticks to either keep it concealed or to force the person to reveal what the discard was. So it's like you pay 1,000 to put it face down. They can pay 2,000 to make you turn it face up. You can pay 4,000 to super keep it face down and not turn it face up. And then I don't know if they can pay even more to flip it back over. Then it's interesting in that, there's a lot of strategy around when you conceal something. And there's already been some like bluffs of concealment and some deep psychological reading of, oh, did they conceal that because they thought that was my winning tile, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really have the same impact for me as with Shizu Mahjong. There's many hands where it hasn't come up at all, which is fair. Like, Fukumoto just also wants to write a normal Mahjong series too, clearly. But it hasn't hit a point of like intense hype or just mind-blowingness that I remember getting from with Shizu Mahjong quite often. But lots of room to develop. You know, if it's anything like Akagi, we're going to be playing Yami Mahjong for another 30 volumes. So good stuff. Want to talk a little bit about Chainsaw Man. So part 2, when it resumed serialization, has been pretty divisive, I think, among a lot of the fans of part 1. Part 1, I think, was already a pretty postmodern interpretation of the battle shonen genre. You know, kind of still having your typical fights and power-ups and factions and whatever, but spacing them out and stringing them along in such a weird, subversive, deliberately fucking with your expectations way. And in part 2, I really feel like they kind of carried that energy forward and left even more of the structure and the tropes and the expectations of battle shonen behind. I would even, you know, hesitate to call it a battle shonen anymore. There's still battles and power systems and stuff like that. It still kind of has the ingredients of a battle shonen, but the story they're telling and the way that they're telling it is just so out of line with any structure you would expect in a battle shonen that I can see why people are feeling like their expectations are being misled. At the same time, it's like, get filtered? Get filtered, you scrubs. Because what he is cooking on this is something so unique and so cool and so crazy that I would really hope people would make the effort to really appreciate it and sink into the story, even if they have no clue what will happen, even if everything they think will happen gets thrown in their face and they're called, like, idiotic for it. Even if chapters make them feel uncomfortable and upset, as many have recently. I think this is heading into a real golden age, and I'm starting to think part 2 is going to surpass everything that I loved about part 1. Some really devastating chapters lately, both on, like, the emotional level. The Yoru and Denji in the alley was just so unpleasant and kind of repulsive, and you felt such this, like, sad empathy for Denji. And then, of course, the conveyor belt sushi incident was just so devastating. Denji on quick pace to be placed among the most brutalized and tortured anime characters of all time. Bro is angling for Shinji's spot. And you might, you know, I've seen some detractors that are like, okay, for what purpose? Denji's been shit on the entire series. Almost everything good that appears to happen to him is in fact just a huge fake out for his life getting colossally worse. And that's, like, true. That's legit. I would kind of like my boy to catch a break because I love him. But man, this is just such, like, delectable, cruel writing. Like, this is the sort of misery writing that I think leads to some of the most powerful character arcs in all of fiction. You know, it's not that it's for the sake of excess. It's not that it's for the sake of torturing for the sake of torturing, like that little life book or whatever it's called. But I feel like this is all building to something. This is building to moments of catharsis that we can't even imagine yet how powerful they will be. I really wanted to call it out in this video, though. And I even considered, like, ooh, should I start counting this as, like, a Weekly Shonen Jump series because I just want to talk about it that badly. The latest chapters, understanding what the scheme of public safety is now, to strategically eliminate certain devils and thereby their effects upon the world, the ultimate goal of deleting the aging devil, and just the inhumane deals that they're making with these devils in order to facilitate this. It's amazing. I'm just like giddy thinking about it. Because I feel like it's an aspect of the world building that they hinted at a few times before, you know, that this is how it operates, and the idea of, like, there was all these horrible things that humanity doesn't even remember anymore because their devils have been eliminated. Nuclear bomb devil, Nazi devil, like, there's allusions to these kind of just being tossed at you for you to kind of interpret and extrapolate into how the rules of this whole system works. And now it's just like, when we're finally kind of getting the final pieces into effect of what sort of change this is, which is, instantaneous, universal, and fucks with everything, deleting the ears and then mouths off of everybody. Right when we're like really coming to grasp how this exactly works and how powerful it is, we're immediately introduced to these antagonists that are like, and we're gonna exploit this. It's like rocketing it up 15 levels past your expectations in parallel with those expectations being set. I'm so excited. I think it's also just kind of nice, like, as much as I've really appreciated this strange, abstract, almost literary quality of part two, where a lot of the things that you would typically describe as arcs are kind of falling into each other, and the plot kind of seems to be wandering in this sort of wistful, strange way. I am also excited for, like, a bit more structure. And to me, this introduced the most structure of anything so far in part two. We have a very clearly defined antagonist. They have a very clearly defined objective. Our relation between that and our protagonist is also pretty clearly defined. It's like I can start getting that other nice type of anticipation that I love in manga so much, where things, are built up as something on the horizon, and then we slowly kind of go through the steps of reaching that moment of climax and then catharsis. I'm sure there'll be a lot of twists along the way, though. As soon as I was saying that, I'm like, nah, I'm an idiot. Fujimoto's gonna rip the rug right out underneath me now that I think that. But it's really good stuff. I think it's really, really good stuff. It seems like we're in an era where people are getting very polarized about their opinions on Chainsaw Man, but I am in the love it camp. Let's talk a little bit about Sanda by Paro Itagaki-san, the daughter of the mangaka of Baki and the creator of manga that are even more batshit insane. She's most famous for creating Beastars. Everybody knows Beastars, right? Everybody loves Beastars. Beastars kind of made you feel weird and uncomfortable, and you were like, why are you telling me about this? I don't need to know about this aspect of the world. All right. Sanda is like a million times more in that direction. This is one of the craziest manga I've ever read. The art style is phenomenal. I love how Paru-sensei draws humans just as much as I loved how she drew animals. They're so vibrant and expressive in these horrifying scenarios. The premise and the setting are both completely batshit insane. If you haven't read it, I would really recommend checking it out. I think this is definitely a love it or hate it type series, and I'm not going to promise that a lot of you won't be in the hate it camp, but it's worth a try. It's just so damn unique that it really could be people's favorite manga, and you won't really know until you're plunging into it. I really can't believe in these latest chapters too. This is kind of spoilers, I guess. So if you want to go in totally untainted or whatever, skip ahead. But they've expanded the lore of the series and the world building in a way that is like so bizarre and so kind of like adversarial or aggressive or whatever you want to say, just like flippantly defiant of the reader's expectations, sort of like taking aspects of the series that you think you'd kind of figured out, and maybe that you kind of think you're building some understanding of what the repercussions are, and then going like, no. It's actually so much crazier than that. Just kidding. Did you think this was a series about the descendants of Santa? It's about the descendants of everyone. Meet the jack-o'-lantern. Meet this demon that hangs out on New Year's. It's just so crazy. Like, the number of times this series has done things that actually left me feeling genuinely disturbed, genuinely repulsed. Given all the crazy crap I read, it's really, really impressive to me. And I think they just keep making the world so much more unsettling, so much more filled with creepy, painful, unresolvable things. Like it's moving in a direction of more mystery, more ambiguity, more uncertainty. It's amazing. Great, great, great series. Check it out. The last few chapters has left me so hyped up for what direction this could go in, because I have no freaking clue what direction this will go in. Kinnikuman is the next on my long, long project of reading the entire history of Jump. I am not content with just reading each week as it comes out, but I also want to explore all of the beloved and notable series throughout the entire magazine's history. This is one that is very highly regarded among some folks on a manga server that I hang out in. They generally have really good taste, and I'd always been curious about it. So I thought, all right, it's time for Kinnikuman. It's fascinating because this is now, a pretty legendary battle shonen series. Something that really defined the genre in a lot of ways and set up a lot of the tropes and structures and plot points and character archetypes that are still really the foundation of battle shonen today. A huge inspiration to Oda. Famously created the character Panda Man that shows up in One Piece all the time in a Kinnikuman create a wrestler contest. So, something that is just one of the foundational texts of the genre. But at the same time, at least as far as I've gotten, it's not really a battle shonen at all. And to be fair, back in 1979 when the series came out, that genre really wasn't very well established. And it was actually operating in a much more common genre back then, which is just a very stupid gag manga. And I cannot really overstate how stupid a gag manga this is at the start. It's the same kind of really scribbly, minimal art style that was popular at the time. The comedic style of just having every single panel and every single page contains some sort of joke or subversion. Just rapid fire setup that contains a punchline, and then a punchline for that setup that also contains another setup, and then the next panel is a payoff to that setup, which also contains another punchline, which also contains another setup, and maybe a visual gag and a reference. It's just so jam-packed and overloaded. A real, machine gun style strategy of comedy where they're just making every joke they can simultaneously. I suppose it's sort of influenced by manzai comedy. There's definitely kind of like a bokeh and tsukomi routine where Kinnikuman is the eternal bokeh and a variety of other characters give him the smack and go, what the hell are you talking about? Which creates this really kind of rapid fire bantery thing. And then I think it's just this impulse to overstuff the visuals with as many sight gags and background gags and crazy over the top reactions, such that the comedy is really hitting on every level simultaneously. Maybe a kid reading this won't know who Antonio Inoki is, although maybe in the 70s that's hard to say, or they won't get that this is like a Rocky parody, or they won't recognize all of the Sentai characters being parodied, or whatever. But they can see that Kinnikuman is reliably making a lot of very funny faces and being humiliated and flopping over and farting and everything. I described it in a way that maybe makes it sound a little asinine or juvenile or whatever, but I love this stuff. I want to be clear that I absolutely love this stuff, and I'm really having a blast reading this. I genuinely find it so funny and just so fascinating. I love the levels of integration of all these jokes, and some of them I think just on the sheer basis of jokes really, really hit. I was talking about on this server just how consistently funny it is when Kinnikuman, or your typical bokeh character, this kind of comedy is a lot in Dr. Slump too. A lot of my favorite gag manga, Roboco does bits like this, where the bokeh, the stupid character, confidently, often with his arms crossed and a serious exposition face, says something extremely stupid. and just the contrast between the presentation and kind of the down note of making that definitive statement and then saying something so beyond the pale in stupidity really never gets old. That's one that consistently cracks me up. It's also very interesting. This is a series that truly feels old to me. I don't read a whole lot of manga from the 70s and earlier. Most of my manga education really starts in the 90s, with rare occasions that are kind of so iconic that they feel a little bit timeless. Like Tezuka is a good example. There's probably a lot of like contemporary references and stuff in Tezuka that are just going over my head. But when I'm reading it, I'm so kind of engrossed in this feeling of, oh, I'm reading Astro Boy or I'm reading Blackjack, that it doesn't feel dated per se, and it doesn't really feel like of its time. Whereas Kinnikuman, it's really kind of blowing my mind to realize how much this truly is written back in the 70s and how different everything was back then. And how like when they do this elongated Rocky parody, that was because Rocky had just come out in Japanese theaters. Like that wasn't like a cliched movie reference to make. That was like a contemporary big picture. And I'm so excited to kind of see this feeling progress through all of the decades, all of these hundreds and hundreds of chapters, just the scope of references and the way that pop culture evolves in parallel. Along those lines, I'm really also excited to see the genre evolve, because I know eventually this becomes, like I said, kind of a staple battle shonen manga. It becomes less gagified, although it's obviously still going to be pretty comedic. I think the biggest transition is that at some point, currently the fights are punchlines, right? Like they're typically resolved in like one or two panels, and the joke is either that Kinnikuman's attack works or it doesn't, or something else silly happens, or whatever. There's not a real emphasis on locking into the fights as fights and just sort of showing choreography and power scaling and the matchups of special attacks and stuff, that I know this series helped define as like the major meat and bones, no pun intended, of what battle shonen becomes. And there's like hints at it bit by bit. I can tell they're devoting a little bit more time to the actual fight scenes themselves, a little more effort in making recurring villains and setting things like power levels and special abilities. They're just like bit by bit taking it more and more seriously. And I think it's going to be so interesting to see that long gradual change, as the genre evolves and stuff. Already I can tell just by the cover of volume 3, it looks a lot more like a battle shonen than anything else I've seen before. So yeah, really enjoying this, really excited to see this long journey through. I'm not rushing through this. I'm not expecting to, get all caught up with it within a month or anything like that. So probably if I keep making videos like this, we will check back in on what's happening in the world of Kinnikuman. Alright, finally, I think I would be remiss if I did not talk about the ending of Nagatoro-san. I am a big defender of this series. I think it is one of the most grossly underrated and misaligned manga of our era. I have seen wild disparaging takes about it that are totally disproportionate, not even to just how bad it is, but to how like popular it is. Like it's become something that's just meme hated on, by people who clearly haven't read it and clearly disproportional to its actual status in like manga popularity. Why? I think a lot of it happened around when the anime came out. There's a lot of kind of like viral meme moments around like the localization of the anime. There was that one person that like lost their freaking mind about the way certain lines were translated, and just ranted endlessly on Twitter, which attracted a whole lot of negative attention to the series. Like, oh geez, that's the kind of fan they have. And then kind of just looking at like a surface level understanding of the series, I think people get a very simplified and negative perception of what the entire thing must be like. People think it is a series for masochists, that it's about masochistic fetishes, where you have the titular Nagatoro-san endlessly, sadistically, gleefully bullying you, and that you, the depraved, perverted reader, enjoy that. And it's kind of like that at the start. And it's built off a series of doujinshi by Nanashi, dating back like a decade before the series even started, that were just straight up masochistic fantasies. And some of them, Nagatoro is like literally punching and kicking the main character until he's like a bloody pulp. It's pretty extreme. And the manga kind of starts like that. Like, I'll admit it, yeah, that it really is sort of playing into that fantasy right from the get-go. But also right from the get-go, they hinted that it was going to grow into something more. And pretty quickly it does become a much more complex and emotional story about these two people that, although they had these lines drawn very early on of bully and bullied, in that relationship start to grow as people and have a much more complete relationship and personhood. The whole series really is about just them stimulating each other to grow and to follow their passions and to become healthier, more well-adjusted, capable people. It's really quite beautiful. And the teasing, bullying aspect is persistent, but it becomes affectionate again very, very quickly, and evolves into just kind of this way that they flirt and that they stay connected with one another and that they inspire one another, and it becomes much more of a bi-directional thing. It's really lovely stuff, and it honestly makes me sad to see, not that it just became like a normie meme of, oh, haha, look at the trash that anime perverts are into. But even among like actual manga readers and stuff, I have a hard time getting people to give this series a chance. And I mean, yeah, you can give a lot of other disclaimers too. It has a lot of other stupid rom-com fan service and, oh my gosh, inadvertent situations. I stumbled into the girls' changing room and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, these are just kind of like staple tropes of the genre. They're not executed in any way that I think is much worse than anything else. And moreover, all of those things just kind of come and go and are discarded, whereas the emotional core really does keep developing in a very satisfying way, all the way up to the major climaxes at the end of the series and the ending. I thought the ending was actually really nice. You can make some complaints, it kind of follows the rom-com cliche where, big spoiler, they get into an actual committed relationship, and then it ends within a volume of that, which is a real frustration for a lot of people across, hundreds and hundreds of rom-com series, but that's just the way it is. I think the real final moments of the series, each of them doing things that proves they've really changed and grown as people in this time of knowing each other. I found that really inspirational, really beautiful. To me, it felt like a perfect capstone for the whole thing. So yeah, good stuff. Like, actually good stuff. Like, come on. It really bugs me, because it's like, the normies hate anime. Yeah, sure. The normies only have like a list of 3 genres that they'll ever watch when it comes to anime. That's whatever. I accept that. But if you're in the trenches and you're already reading other stuff that's going to get you tisked, why are you doing friendly fire now? Why are you trying to be an op and carry the guns of our enemy? Can't you open your heart to the idea that a series like Nagatoro could be good? Because it is good. It is good. As someone who's read a lot of rom-coms and a lot of stinkers in that genre, I understand where people are coming from. It's not wrong to assume that a series like this might be bad. A whole lot of them are. It's not wrong to make some inferences on the premise and then say, okay, well, how could that possibly be good? That's okay. But you gotta keep an open mind to the idea of, like, well, damn, it actually is good this time. So yeah, really liked it. Good stuff. I'll miss it. And that's that. That's the 6th series I wanted to talk about. I had fun doing this. I hope you had fun watching it if you watched it. I'd like to do this again. I don't want to set myself any like strict schedule or anything, or else I'll probably just come to resent doing this. But I'm probably just going to like keep track of stuff that I've been reading that I really feel compelled to share and talk about. And then once I hit a list of 6 or whatever, we'll make another one. So look forward to that. Bye bye.